Welcome back, guys and gals, Uncle Nightshift here, and this video will be all about painting, but not your everyday ordinary painting, not your grandma's painting. This will be painting and weathering all in one, because my New Year's resolution is to paint models more efficiently, which I'm sure can be a benefit for a lot of us. I'll be painting the vehicle and mine rollers in different ways. The BMR-3 will be more fresh and maintained, while the rollers will be old and faded. As such, I'll divide the video into chapters, and we'll start with the BMR. Video is not the only thing I'll be breaking into parts. Yeah, I wish it was this easy in real life. Anyway, the model has collected a lot of dust as I was building it, so it's necessary to give it the usual bathroom treatment. This, however, means water will collect in every deep corner, and it usually takes forever to evaporate, so I blasted it out with my airbrush set to about 30 psi. Most of the smaller assemblies are easy to hold with laundry bags, however, the mine roller arms need some life hacking. I think this will be okay because it's out of sight and I'll be able to cover the hole with mud once the painting is finished. With every part being accounted for, it's time to hit it with some primer. This model is very complicated and thus will have a ton of shadowed parts. As such, a black primer is a good option. Diluting it with Mr. Leveling Thinner will leave us with a smooth, mirror-like surface and we can confidently spray it into the tightest places without any issues. This time I decided to prime the tracks as well instead of the usual blackening process, and here I used a dark brown primer which seems like a very good foundation for weathering effects. Let's now start with the actual painting. I have these two AK real colors for modern Russian armor, and I'm gonna be using this Tamiya lacquer thinner with paint drying retarder. It works really well and it's ideal for long airbrushing sessions. Now, I have to admit this first step wasn't the best idea because in the end it was kinda pointless, but I'll talk about it anyway. So, my plan was to start with the green paint straight from the bottle sprayed in this random cloudy pattern, leaving the black primer showing through. I was hoping for a random, sort of saturated layer, if that makes any sense. It didn't work though, so let's move on. So, the next sort of base layer was lightened with dark yellow from Tamiya. This paint is very good for lightening green colors if you don't want them to become overly saturated like with pure yellow or desaturated like with buff or light gray. So, this is our main layer which covers most of the surface. The dark spots you see in corners are not a coincidence. This is the dark undercoat working its magic. Now I played around with something that can be described as Airbrushed Pin-Wash. Yeah, I know, it's a kind of a stretch if I call it like that, but the idea is to outline all surface details, and also to emphasize the shadowed parts. I like to use a mixture of black and brown, which I simply call grime, because it's a universal dirt color which works... Actually, it works on every model. We can use it slightly more opaque if you want to build up the effect more quickly, or dilute it a lot, almost like a colored lacquer thinner, and spray it at very low pressures. Speaking of pressures, it's hard for me to tell you the exact numbers during each step, because this Fengda BD180 that I'm using for fine work has a pressure adjustment knob at the bottom. It's very convenient because you can adjust the pressure on the go without constantly reaching down for your compressor, and as a result I keep the pressure constantly set at 20 psi, but I adjust it on the airbrush, sometimes going as low as, let's say, I don't know, 5 psi, but that's of course just my guess. But yeah, the model looks pretty wild after this step. Mind you, I'm still learning this approach on the go, so there's a pretty high chance I'll do something completely different on the next model. Which, I guess, is gonna be fun. The next layer is even lighter version of the base coat. This step will not only tone down the shadow grimy effect, by the way this is again completely up to us, in some places we can leave it more evident, just barely in others, of course it all depends on how deep or pronounced the detail is, so it's not only good for that, but we're also able to create some subtle color modulation or zenith lighting, making stuff look more three-dimensional. And of course, spraying it in a very tight cloudy pattern creates a nice mottled effect, which theoretically means we don't have to use the oil dot technique. Again, it saves us time. And of course this was made using the same paints like before, I just added a lot more dark yellow this time. Then I took it even further by adding deck tan into the previous paint mixture. This color was again sprayed in the same fashion but only on the most exposed parts of the model. My aim was to create a gradual paint job which gets lighter and lighter, keeping the shadow places dark, details outlined such as this weld bead, and most importantly adding color variation and texture, which is achieved with the cloudy pattern. Compared to, let's say, color modulation, which is sprayed in even smooth layers, this makes the model look more faded. Deciding how bright we want to go is again completely up to us. However, I felt like making the model even lighter would take away the characteristic hue of the modern Russian olive green, so I just used that on some of the small fixtures. Once I was done, I sprayed the entire model with a few generous passes of leveling thinner. Even though I used the advanced lacquer thinner from Tamiya, it wasn't advanced enough for my clumsy airbrushing skills, and I ended up with a few rough spots here and there. Flooding them with lacquer thinner will slightly melt the paint for a few seconds, which will result in a smooth surface once it dries. I randomly picked some brown, olive drab and yellowish green LifeColor paints and diluted them into a glaze with tap water. As you can guess, I used them to distinguish some details on the surface, such as reactive armor bricks, larger details like individual fuel tanks, fixtures like periscope covers, and so on. I also picked out every bolt on the model with a light paint. Also, check out the ammunition can. It was painted with the rest of the model using the same paints, but I gave it a couple of brown glazes and now it stands out. Finally, I gave the model several wet coats of VMS satin varnish, which I can't stress it enough, it's the best varnish ever created in my opinion. This concludes painting of the BMR, which is quite subdued. So let's have more fun with mine rollers. They started their life the same way as the BMR, with a random coat of modern Russian green. However, I then resprayed them with another uneven coat, this time with the grey green, leaving the previous layer visible here and there. Then I continued with the lighter tone. This was again achieved by adding dark yellow into the paint. I sprayed the exposed portions in a tight, random pattern. The previous coats will remain visible as small stains here and there. Then the airbrushed wash, dirt layer, fake shadow, whatever it's supposed to be. Or, you know what? Help me find a good name for this method in the comments. I know it's nothing new in the modeling world, but I never caught anyone calling it by any name in fact. I think the coolest aspect of this technique is how we can create subtle gradients, and in some cases the shadowed part will look good as it is. So we won't have to go back to it with washes, chipping, or anything. I think my intentions are becoming clear at this point, right? I also painted the mine roller wheels with German grey, which is a good base color for steel surfaces. Any overspray is gonna be easy to fix with the upcoming steps. Again, saved a ton of time because I didn't have to paint them with a paintbrush. The lightest layer was mixed from the previous light mixture and yellow-green. Yeah, I took a different approach here and I shifted the tone towards yellow, but it's for a very good reason as you'll see. Next, I covered both rollers with even coats of chipping fluid, left them to dry completely, and then sprayed the front section with pure yellow-green. Military green colors tend to fade into this tone, which is quite interesting, but it provides us with a lot of contrast. This effect is quite radical if I'm being honest, and I wouldn't come up with it on my own, but that's the magic of finding random reference pictures on the internet. Seeing this picture actually gave me the idea, like, okay, I'll make the mine roller faded, bleached by sun and rusty, but I'll keep the BMR more fresh, because these vehicles are usually well maintained, and the mine roller is just an attachment, like, not an integral part of the vehicle. Another idea taken from another reference photo is the mine roller frame having a more greenish hue. This was achieved by spraying very diluted green as a filter. The mine detonator pipe is also an attachment to the mine roller and as such can be swapped around, so I painted those the same way as the BMR. Okay, enough of spraying and mottling and whatever. Let's go to the actual pre-weathering. I took a very similar approach to the Syrian T90 from last year, so I started by blocking out the heaviest mud accumulations using Wilder's textured earth. This way I won't have to bother with painting the rubber parts on the wheels as they're always covered in mud. Same with the tracks, I just ham-fisted the mud into the tread pattern with a large paintbrush and then wiped it off from the ice cleats. The lower hull is most likely never going to be seen once the model is assembled, but a quick layer of mud takes only a few minutes and it's, for that good feeling like, yeah, it's there and now I can sleep more peacefully. Mine rollers also get packed with mud, and this is actually a place where it's gonna look really cool once it's properly painted. They have a very shallow pattern though, so I applied just a small amount of mud here and blended it with tap water. Now this was all fun and games, but now it's time for the real magic. I sprayed the whole model with 2 layers of chipping fluid, just like before, leaving each one to dry completely. Now we can create some pre-dusting, but it's not gonna be the usual everyday pre-dusting. I kinda want to make this model really muddy, so, not too faded or beaten up, but rather just covered in dust and mud, which is often the case on maneuvers and training operations. So I was quite generous with the amount of acrylic dust, and in fact it's not even a big deal if you overdo it at all, because we have the chipping fluid underneath. I'm using tap water and a large soft paintbrush to very gently, and I mean extra gently, rub it away, leaving a very interesting textured dust layer. I mean, some of the benefits are quite obvious. It looks really cool, pretty authentic if I do say so myself, and it's not too difficult to pull it off. Of course, it's mostly meant to be a sort of foundation for enamel effects, but it turned out so well in some places, I'll probably leave it as it is here and there. But uncle, you clever rascal, I hear you ask, why aren't you applying it so early? There's no pin wash, no chipping, no details are painted. My hand is almost gravitating towards the dislike button on this video. And I hear you very clearly, my dear eagle-eyed watcher, but the thing is, the whole point of pre-weathering is to create a basic layout of different effects which we'll be able to refine with further techniques. But most importantly, it is there to save us time. Regular followers of my channel are gonna be very familiar with all those cases where I spent time painting lower hulls, wheels, back plates and other parts of models just to later cover them completely with dust and mud. And for what reason? Just to waste several hours. So as a quick explanation on what's gonna be next, let's say I'll be adding pin washes. Well, now I don't have to apply them over the entire model because I can already see which places are covered in pre-dusting, and as such, I'll be treating them with enamel earth tones, thus no need for a pin wash. And the same goes for chipping and any other fine and time-consuming method. I always sort of believed that this is just the way models and weathering are, that there's no way around it and you can't predict how much dust and mud you're gonna apply on your model. But as it turns out, you can, by pre-weathering it. I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, but yes, the benefits are huge. It helps us to better understand how the model will look once it's finished, it saves us time, it looks incredibly cool in my opinion. I mean, just look at this. The Mine roller frame looks almost finished by now. And of course, it's not just about washing down some Tamiya dust paints with chipping fluid, the mottled base coat underneath also plays a huge role in this. And in theory, we might be able to make it even more exciting yet efficient with stuff like quickly applied chipping with a sponge or something, to sort of get a rough sketch of all the effects and then refine them once they're in place. Same with the roller wheels. It's just a dark gray base coat, a very diluted layer of acrylic textured earth, then chipping fluid and pre-dusting. And they already look like what I've seen in some reference pictures. Of course, I'll add more effects to make them look more interesting and authentic, but overall, the whole Mine roller assembly looks pretty mint already. Of course, we don't need to go with the chipping fluid all the time. Wheels are gonna be covered in a lot of mud, so just a quick smooth layer of dust will soften the edges of the stippled acrylic paste and make them look a little bit tidier. Same thing with the tracks. Here I'm just making sure they'll be consistent with the rest of the pre-weathering, and that's pretty much it. Unfortunately, I've run out of time for this week, so we'll have to continue with more refined weathering and detail painting in the next video. However, I think this already looks pretty solid and it gives us a very good idea about how the model is gonna look once it's finished. And I mean, how many times could we say that in the past? What's even more unfortunately, very unfortunate, I still have to keep the mine rollers attached to cocktail sticks, so I can't dry fit them to the BMR for these final shots. Which only means I should wrap this video up very quick. So without dragging it for too much longer, thank you for watching, my friends, and I hope you found this video helpful or at least interesting to watch. If you did, let me know by giving it a like and leaving a comment, or a dislike if you didn't like it. I just want to hear your honest opinion, that's all. And also, thank you so much to my Patreon subscribers who helped to make this weekly show possible. Your support goes a very long way, and it's actually a place where you can find lots of extra content, my friends. I post there almost every day with frequent updates from all my projects. You can also get 1 week early ad-free videos, so you'd be able to watch the next right now. We also have direct messages so we can get in touch, and also these very nice studio photos which you can download in full resolution and keep them for your own personal reference. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say this week. I'm kinda stoked to continue weathering the model, so I guess that's what I'm gonna do right now. Again, thank you ladies and gentlemen, stay safe, stay awesome, leave a like if you like what you saw, dislike if you disliked it, and I'll see you the next week. Cheers, my friends!